Do you struggle to ask for help? When you do ask, are you giving up ownership and control of the situation? Do you think there could be a better way? Welcome back to Neuroconversant Leadership, where we talk about effective leadership and communication, especially in the STEM workplace. I'm Jeremy Doran, and I love to help great engineers become great leaders. I recently wrote 3 articles on LinkedIn. I only planned on writing 2. The first one was suggesting to always try to say yes. And the second one was to always start with no until you're convinced otherwise. Each attitude's appropriate depending on the question being asked. And once I finished the second, I realized that both pieces of advice really are what it takes to empower people. So I wrote a third article synthesizing the 2 points of view. When people are asking you to try out something, always try to say yes. When we're raising kids or running a business, we're very risk averse, and it gets us in the habit of saying no. Especially when you're raising little kids, it's the first word they learn because parents say to them so often, no. And we usually do it because we know what works. We know what's safe. People use the expression, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Problem is that it may not be broke. It may work for us. That doesn't mean it works for others. And just because it works doesn't mean that it's the best solution. There could be better solutions than the current one. So it may not be broke, but it may not be perfect either. One example I remember from when I worked in corporate America, I asked if I could work from home. Now, this was before the pandemic, and it was when not a lot of people got to do it. I had very good reasons for why I thought it made sense, both for me, the company, and my manager. The just instant reaction was no. And when trying to ask why, basically the answer was because other people aren't doing it. So that was a response that was just I've not done it before. It's not broken this way. We're not going to fix it by making a change. But then the pandemic happened and it forced people to start saying yes to working from home. And what they found was that people were actually more productive and they were happier, and it didn't actually cost any more. There was no extra investment. There may have been a little bit of extra technology, but it was saved for with the reduction in office space. So that forced people to realize, hey, the old way was working. This new way can work as well. But now companies are trying to pull people back in. And quite frankly, there's a lot of resistance because people working from home were happier and they can show that they're just as productive. And the companies claim that they want people back in the office because it's better for collaboration. And that very well may be true in all and or some cases. But I'm pretty convinced that a portion of the reason is because management feels like they've lost control and they want it back, which just goes to show so much of the saying no is trying to control a situation and not empowering or trusting your people to do what they need to do to get things done. And then the other article was when people are asking you for help, always say no until you're convinced otherwise. We all want to help other people. Many of us will tend to say yes, even when it doesn't really make sense. We may be working on a really important project and someone asks us for something fairly trivial. A lot of times I've seen people stop the important work they're doing to go and help someone with something else. But even worse is what it does to the person that you're helping. It can actually be detrimental to them. I used to have a number of employees and I was very stressed out because I was very busy. And they would come to me with a problem and I would solve the problem. And then they would keep coming to me with a problem. And it got to the point where I realized I'm just solving these problems rather than teaching them how to solve it themselves. So when they would come to me with a problem, I would then say, if I weren't here, what would you do? And they didn't like that. They'd say, well, I'd call you. Nope, you can't call me. You have to try to come up with a solution. And they resisted, but I would force them. And if they came up with a solution that was anywhere close to what I would do, I'd say, great, try it, let me know how it goes. Over time, they got in the habit of only coming to me when they had a proposed solution. So they were starting to think about how to solve their own problems. And then as it came further and further, they would come to me and said, here's the problem I had, here's what I did to fix it, here's how it went. Boom. I empowered them. It saved me a bunch of time and it made them much better at their jobs because they could start figuring out solutions for themselves. So both things are to show that whether you are saying yes to someone who wants to try out a new thing or you're saying no to someone who's coming to ask you for help, both of those things are empowering others. But the follow-up question is, how do you empower yourself when you're the one asking for help? So those 3 articles were about empowering others. But no matter what your role is, sometimes you're going to need help from someone else. So the first piece of advice I would give is don't be afraid to ask. If you need help, ask for help. I one time had to move a couch, and rather than getting help, I decided to do it myself. This was a big, heavy couch. It was one of those pull-outs. Probably took me about 45 minutes to get it to where it needed to go. If I'd simply asked someone for help, it would have taken about 45 seconds. A lot of us are just ingrained in the idea that I can figure this out myself, I can get this done myself, especially people in the technical fields. They've learned to solve problems. And when it comes time to ask for help, sometimes they struggle. It's the same with questions. I've found that asking questions of something that I don't understand is something that for a while I was resistant to do. But once I started doing it, I realized how few other people actually knew the answers as well. So don't be afraid to ask. But the second part is really important, and it's tell them what you actually need. So it can be something like this. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Here's where I am stuck, and this is what I need. And what I need can be a few different things. If you are really stuck and you just don't know, the what I need might be advice on what the next step should be. If you're a little further, you may have figured out the next step, but you may need advice on how to take that next step. If you know how to, sometimes you just need an extra tool or some other resource. And sometimes you're going to need their intervention, whether it's like an access code or keys to the storage room or their authority, etc. So if you ask them very specifically for what you need, it makes their job of helping you a lot simpler. You cannot just go up to someone and say, I have a problem, and then stop. When you do that, what you're actually saying is, I used to have a problem, and now you have a problem. And that's no good. So rather than saying, hey, Sandy, production's going to be delayed because we can't get part X on time, if you stop there, it's Sandy's problem. And what you could say instead is, hey, Sandy, we've got a snag in production. Part X is on back order. And then if it's advice on what the next step should be, the question might be, can we use a different part, or should we just call the customer and tell them it's going to be late? Or a little bit better is advice on how to take a next step. Say, hey, I think part Y, which we have in stock, should work. Do you think so? What are your thoughts? That's great. You've at least proposed a solution and you're getting feedback on it. Sometimes you're confident that it works and you don't need the feedback. You just need a tool or resource. So, hey, I can make part Y work if you can get me access to the original drawings. Great. You've proposed a solution and you've said exactly what you need in order to get through that solution. And sometimes it's just their intervention, whether it's, like I said, access codes or their authority. So I can make this with part Y, but our cost is going to go up by 10%. Can I get your approval to make that change so that we can deliver it to the customer on time? Any of those are great ways to ask for help in a way that you've empowered yourself by coming up with the right solution, getting to a thing that you can't solve on your own, and telling them very exactly what it is that you need. Any manager is going to be happy with that sort of request for help because they know that you've gotten as far as you can get, rather than just saying, I've got a problem, and putting your hands up and waiting for the problem to be solved for you. Now, if you want to take empowerment to the next level, don't just do this when you're reacting to problems. Proactively look for improvements that you can make. If something isn't a problem, but it could be better, think about what could be done about it. So when doing this, there are a few things that I look for. Is how does it help your boss? or how does it help the organization? Sometimes they're the same thing, sometimes they're not the same thing. It may make your boss's life easier, and it may make more money for the company. Very importantly, how does it benefit your customer or client? What are they going to get out of it? But don't forget this one. How does it benefit you? This solution or this improvement, how is it going to benefit you? Is it going to make your job easier? Is it that you're going to be able to develop new skills that will help move you up in your career? Is it that you get to spend more time working on solving this problem, which is what you really love to do, rather than doing some of the other things you don't necessarily love to do? So you get to focus your time where you want it to focus. For empowering yourself when you're asking for help is, first of all, be willing to ask for help. Second of all, ask very specifically, solve as much of it as you possibly can. Get to the end of the road and then ask for something very specific to help you get to the next place. And the third one is, don't just do it when you have a problem. Do it when there's something that's working okay or even working well, and see what you can do to make it better. And I think empowerment is everyone's responsibility. I often talk about this in communication. You should assume that good communication is 100% your responsibility. I got this advice, it was marriage advice, a long, long time ago. And he said, people think that marriage is a 50-50 proposition, but it's not. It's 100-100. Because sometimes you have nothing to give, and it's 100% on the other person. Sometimes they have nothing to give, and it's 100% on you. Communication with anyone is that way, depending on the situation that a person's in and what's going on in their lives. They may or may not be able to give 100% effort into making communication go well. I always say your job as an employee is to understand how to work with your boss, and your job as a manager is to understand how to work with your employees. And so as a leader, use the yes and the no in the appropriate places to help empower people to develop their own skills and solve their own problems. But as an employee or a student or a child, take responsibility yourself, empower yourself, especially when you need help with something. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate having you here, and I'm very interested in your feedback. Have there been times when you've asked for help and you noticed that you were just abdicating? Have you been frustrated when people came to you with a problem and no proposed solution? I want to hear your stories, so if you can, send me an email, jdoran@neuroconversantleadership.com. I'd love to hear about your story, and if appropriate, I would like to use it in a future podcast. Thanks again, and have a great week.